morning. So today I want to talk to you guys about reading to children. So first thing we're going to do is I want you guys to hold up a thumbs up if you remember the very first day of class here in Education 318, we read a book. So put your thumbs up if you remember what the book title was or what it was about. Okay. I'm going to call on all of you guys. Okay, do you remember what the book title was? Anybody else remember what the book's about? And what was it?
It was about a child who struggled to read, and she continually struggled until her teacher was finally helped her learn how to read.
Exactly. So why do you think that we remembered that? Because the thing is that was almost 2 months ago. So why would we remember that book from the first day of school? Does anybody know? I think for me personally, that book was pretty impactful because it had a lot to do with the subject. And for me, it got me super excited about being a teacher and super excited about teaching students, like the character in the book, about reading and about phonics. So the objectives for today is, in this presentation, we're going to discuss reading to children provides stronger motivation, larger vocabulary, wider exposure to concepts about language and print, and an increased attention span. It also, we're going to go over read aloud techniques, and then we're going to go over selecting books for students in the classroom. So in the book, Reading to Children, it talks about, it's been emphasized for decades that the single most important activity for building the knowledge required for eventual success in reading is reading aloud to children. And I think that we can attest to this as we think about the first day of class and that book that we read and just how that affected us as students. Through literature, we can connect with the human heart. We have a broadening perspective and purpose. So I want you guys to think of a book that you've read either as a student or as a high schooler that has changed your heart and your perspective and maybe just encouraged you or motivated you. So I want you to get together with the person next to you and talk about a book that's impacted you.
You guys ever read Yes.
Okay, so we're going to bring it back in. Who wants to raise their hand and let me know which book they talked about? Anybody? Brooke?
I didn't talk about a book, but I talked about a poem. It's called What Teachers Make. I'm not sure if anyone's read it before, but it's really good.
What about you, Brianna? Did you talk about
I talked about Twilight because that's
Yeah.
what I was reading.
Yeah, I remember Twilight. Anybody else over here? A book that maybe changed their perspective, encouraged them to read.
Jesus Speaks.
Jesus Speaks.
Freaks. Jesus Freaks, like the book.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so for me, I remember being in kindergarten, and on this very first day of school, I was really scared and super nervous. And I remember going to my teacher, and she sat us all down, and she read these 2 books to us. I don't know if you remember them. I Love You Forever. I'm sure most of you have read this, right? And then The Kissing Hand. Has anybody heard of The Kissing Hand? Okay, just a couple of you. So The Kissing Hand, my mom used to read this to me every single first day of school. Just to bring me comfort because I used to get really nervous, and then I remember going to school and looking at my hand and thinking about my mom. So this is just an example of how books can really impact us. And I mean, I'm 22 years old now and I still remember these books. So I want to talk about how books give us motivation. The book says that reading aloud is motivating because it stimulates creativity and imagination within each individual listener, but it also leads to connections with others. Read aloud motivates students to read a book based upon an author. So basically, when we read different stories like Twilight, when you read the first Twilight, did you want to read the rest of the series? Yeah, because the author is so good, right? Exactly. And it also builds a connection with others who like the same book. So going back, I'm sorry, Brianna, I'm going to pick on you again. But because of Twilight, did you ever get together with your friends and talk about the book and talk about, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen with Edward? I thought about the same thing all the time when I did Twilight. So the third thing that books can motivate students is it offers a rich and unifying source for laughter in a school setting. So I wanted to really talk about this third one because I think that this is super, super important. In our generation, there's a lot of technology and a lot of things that kind of take over just the good old-fashioned reading out loud to our students. They're going to be faced with a lot of emotion, a lot of different things that they have to go through. And to be able to read books, like I'm going to go back to the Kissing Hand, for me, like I tear up when I read that because it's so encouraging about the love of a mother for their daughter. So in a school setting, it's super, super important for teachers to be able to read these books to students and to allow them to feel that emotion and that laughter or whatever the book brings upon them in that safe setting, because a lot of times our students won't have that opportunity in their home. Vocabulary. Children explain their vocabulary more through exposure to language than through explicit teaching. So I want you to think about that for a second. As I'm teaching to you, I'm not really giving you a whole lot of exposure to vocabulary. I'm going to talk about it, but really what's going to affect you is through reading. Reading different things is going to give you more exposure to vocabulary. So think about the language that children are exposed to in the world around them. What are some of these things? So I want you to think about the different language that children are going to be exposed to in this day and age. Does anybody have any idea, any guesses? Different kind of things. What about movies? What about TV shows? Does anybody else have any? Music. Music's a huge one. Anything else? Internet. Internet's a big one, especially with like Twitter and Instagram and all those kind of things. So thinking about that, children rarely hear academically challenging words in these kind of settings. And I mean, in a lot of times, like I know in different TV shows, they can hear some academic words, but is it really going to challenge them like a good book would? In read-alouds, children can be flooded with words in a comfortable setting. And I also want to talk about vocabulary too. I think as I thought about this, it's crazy to think about all the different ways that children are exposed to vocabulary in this day and age. Through, if you think about just through the TV shows and the kind of stuff that's out there. And for our generation, guys, like technology is huge and way more than it was in previous years. So I think that this is super important. Language and print concepts. The book talks about when you're reading to children, you are team teaching. You are bringing into your classroom some of the greatest masters of language in the world. And together, you're exposing children to concepts about print and the rhythm of language. Does this quote make sense to anybody? Thumbs up if this makes sense to you, or thumbs down if you're like, it's just a bunch of words. Thumbs up. Okay, so I think this is super cool because this is basically saying that when we're teaching, we're a team with literature. We use books to help us, to help our lessons, and to just kind of give us more of an advantage. And when children are read to, often they gain a sense of story that helps them as they learn to read and write themselves. Attention span. This one's pretty big, especially going back to the technology that we talked about. So read aloud to children regularly and rereading favorite books increase children's attention span. And I know you're looking at this thinking, what? Because I know a lot of times when I get read to, you lose me, or I think about something different. But this is actually saying that when we do read alouds more and more and more, children actually learn to sit longer and focus their minds for longer periods of time. And this is vital for our generation. And think about the generation right now and reading stamina. So because of this, it builds reading stamina. And reading stamina is the ability to read for long periods of time without getting distracted or distracting others. Read aloud techniques. These are different ways to just kind of help us as teachers really engage our students and really make sure that they're understanding what we're reading and just to get them excited. Expression. If I read a book like this and I look down and I say this is the book, does that excite you at all? What does it make you think? She doesn't care, so why should I care? So when we read, we want to have expression. We want to get excited. We want to make sure that our children get excited about this book. So we also have illustrations. When reading, you want to make sure that the illustrations go along with what you're reading and just be careful with how you use it too. Make sure that the children can see it. Questions. It's super vital to ask questions while you're reading to your kids just to make sure that they're engaged and that they're getting it, that they're understanding the book. Book selection. Just like we talked about before, you want to choose a book that you like. If you don't like a book, your student's not going to like the book. You also want to choose a variety of books just to kind of expand your child, get them excited about other things they probably wouldn't. All right, so now we're going to take a quiz. You guys can get on Kahoot. Is that everybody? Alright, let's start. It's stressed the most important activity in reading is reading aloud to children. Is this true or false? True. Read alouds do not stimulate motivation. True or false? Awesome. Read aloud motivates students in all of the following ways except enables them to solve math problems. Children expand their vocabulary more through exposure to language than through teaching. True or false? Teachers are a team in a sense. Awesome. All right, great job, guys. Thank you so much.